On our fourth episode, I spoke with Jesse Chauvin, who owns a burrito chain in Guatemala called Ta Corazon. He shared with us how his restaurants have been affected by COVID and how he, as a small business owner, is learning to thrive under ever-changing local and national ordinances. He also said that there seemed to be an emerging pattern among small business owners, and he fit them into three groups. The first group saw the pandemic coming like a wave of economic instability and sold off their assets and tried to recoup losses. Then they got out of the game. A second group denied the threat of the virus and went on as business as usual. This couldn't happen here. This group relied more on hope than planning. And a third group saw the wave approaching, accepted its seriousness, and began to pivot their business model to evolve to a COVID world. This episode's guest, Angela, is in that third group. Angela runs a small CBD shop called Kind Lab that's transitioning from a traditional brick and mortar setup located in Beverly, Mass. To an all-online business model. On this episode, she'll share why she got into CBD, where the business is going, and how all of her work fits into a larger conversation around self-care and improving one's health. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is Wi-Fi Water. Angela, how are you? Welcome to Wi-Fi Water.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's we're getting into the fall, as it were, even though it's 80 degrees. So
I know.
There's that. And I just found out that you are living in Marblehead, but you're still at the storefront that's in Beverly, which is cool because I grew up right on Prospect Hill, currently living in Salem, and I go cycling all the time throughout Marblehead. I do the Neck, and then I do Old Downtown, New Downtown, and I do all of Marblehead. So I feel like we're constantly kind of, we're always crossing each other's paths, even if we don't know it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you're currently downtown Cabot, I would say the main artery in Beverly, even though, Rantoul has been ramping up. And you've been there for how long at the Kind Lab storefront?
So we've been here at 276 Cabot for about 18 months.
About 18 months. Okay. And you are now in a moment where you're going to move, you're going to kind of like leave the nest, and things are changing. A lot of this, I'm sure, was brought on by the pandemic. And you're going to be going, what's the next step for Kind Lab? I think we'll talk about next step, and then maybe we'll come back to the origin story.
All right, that sounds good. We had thought of, so the reason why I opened the store was really to force myself into some level of structure. It was to give me a deadline with the company. If I'm opening a store, I have to have products, I have to have packaging, I have to have my logo, I have to have all those things done. So the store, I kind of, like I said, kind of forced myself into, getting things done and basically getting my act together. And then, of course, it's given me a great opportunity to do a lot of work on my messaging and do a lot of outreach. And, a big part of our mission is to help erase the stigma of cannabis and make it a lot more accessible to people. So the store has been a great opportunity for that. But even before the pandemic, I was thinking of potentially closing it because the store was really, like I said, was a utility for me to get it together, for me to hone my messaging, for me to really get great feedback from customers and fine tune my formulations. And before the pandemic hit, I was thinking about kind of pivoting, focusing more on kind of like a wholesale model and really going all in on that and having more time to do, pop-ups and all that kind of festivals and fairs and that kind of thing. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. Because the biggest thing I was concerned about with changing beforehand and kind of focusing on that more, kind of more of the wholesale versus the direct to consumer was that I had such a great and very loyal customer base here in Beverly. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to train them to all go online when they're so used to coming into the store? And boom, welcome to the pandemic. Where nobody is shopping anymore. I had to close the store, obviously, for months. And all of my customers got trained to go online. And so now things have almost gotten flip-flopped where now people just don't have the confidence to come into stores yet. And I'm just not seeing things pick back up. And so I'm really going to focus on, now that everyone is trained to go online, I'm really kind of going all in on that channel. I'm trying to implement new features and chat and ways for me to translate the store experience to online and really kind of go all in on that direct to consumer channel now that just the landscape has changed so much with COVID.
When you moved in 18 months ago into the Cabot Street location, were you thinking that, you'd maybe want to eventually go online? Or was that even an idea? Or how much of a reality was that? Because it almost seems now, it's easier to connect the dots looking back. It almost seems now from an outside perspective, it's like, wow, Angela did a great job. She came in, she created a storefront, she built up a customer base, and then she was able to translate and bring those customers online to be able to continue to move forward. So how much of this was maybe pre-thought out? Was there ever an idea like, yeah, I want to have the store for, 60 months, 5 years, really get a customer base, and then I'll be able to save some overhead and we'll be able to go online and hopefully continue to see revenue gains moving forward?
That's exactly correct. Like the online, having a retail store was never like part of the big overarching mission, but it was a great means to an end. It's been a fabulous way for me to connect with customers. Like I said, get like immediate and really good feedback on products and be able to tweak and understand what people want and need. And I was hoping to keep the store open. To be honest, I was hoping at some point to convert it to like be a marijuana dispensary. So, but I knew that eventually, CBD has become a lot more ubiquitous and it would also be a lot harder to compete. So I was either going to evolve the model in the store and start, bringing in other products and services and that kind of thing. And just kind of, I needed to kind of expand and have a bigger vision for the store. But that was a full-time job. Or I could pivot and just be like, all right, I'm going to go all in on hemp and really build Kind Lab and focus on the marijuana side of the business because that's a full-time job. So I was already kind of at a crossroads where I needed to go all in somewhere and I was trying to kind of pick a lane. And then COVID just kind of kicked me into one by default. So my intent wasn't to open the store and then promptly close it, but I did, like the retail the way it is now was not something I saw myself doing in 5 years. I knew that model would need to evolve. And that also that I already had e-commerce up and running, but it was really more of just like you have a website, so you should have e-commerce versus being like a legitimate channel for me where now it's a major revenue stream.
And how much of your pre-COVID, how much of your revenue was coming in through the website and how much of it was coming through the front door?
I mean, I was 90% the retail store. So when that got stonewalled, a lot of it did translate to online, which is great. Obviously, I don't get the walk-ins and that kind of thing, which is a bummer because trying to catch walk-ins online, you're dealing with social media and all the noise and Facebook and Google search and that kind of thing. So I do miss out on a lot of those opportunities, but thankfully I have a pretty loyal customer base. And so that has translated really well. And now I'm almost flip-flopped. I would say at this point, 70% of my sales are online or wholesale. And then I've got a much smaller percentage coming in from the store.
And looking at the product, it's a unique product. And I've been in your store multiple times. I bought different products. I won the Mother's Day jellies, which were amazing. Not gummies, not jellies. Yeah. And so much of the product is, there's a saying, like when you're buying something, 90% of the sell is in the touch. When you walk into the Mac store and the Apple store, the Mac store, when you walk into the Apple store and you pick up an iPhone, you're like, okay, I kind of want this thing. That's why they put them everywhere, Moving forward, what are the ways that you hope to get people to engage with your products? Because they are intimate products. It's not just an iPhone. It's actually like a cream that I may rub on, or it's something I'm going to ingest. Moving forward, are you thinking, like you said, maybe do some pop-ups, some farmers markets, maybe even like rent a space for a month and then do kind of like an exhibit? I'm going to be here for a month. Come by and check out product. What does it look like to moving forward to be able to continue to gain new customers? And because so much of that in retail, as we know, is in the touch and the feel.
Right. And that was part of the idea of, as things start open up and people, like right now, we can't even do any sampling in stores, to be able to get that one-on-one and to be able to, like, those longer term pop-ups are becoming a lot more popular. Like over the holiday season, if there is a space open and someone wants to rent me something for the month of December, I'll pop up and get a couple partners and put something together. Or, during a busy summer month in a, vacation kind of town. So doing that, going into, natural food stores and, larger chains and that kind of thing is definitely part of the goal to continue having that high touch. But I will tell you a great thing about having the store, it's been really hard telling people that I'm going to close it when they come in, especially like longtime customers that I know by sight and, I know them pretty well. And when they come in though, they say, oh, I'm so sorry you're going to be closing the store. I'm really going to miss fill in the blank. And those, what I've kind of done is like over the past couple of weeks, I was like, what are those things that people keep saying they're really going to miss at the store? And how do I translate that to the website? So the beautiful store that's very approachable and looks clean and is very pretty, like visually appealing. Okay, how do I translate that to the website? Being able to get really detailed feedback and understand who you're buying from. I can translate that to the website. Being able to guide customers and give them product recommendations and usage guidance, that it is like a lot more detailed than what other customers, other websites provide. So those are all the things now that I'm looking into. I'm working on, a lot of content on the site to help people be able to choose what product's right for them without having to have like the one-on-one guidance, but like, a product quiz. I have interactive chat now on the site. I have a lot of product recommendations so people can get an idea of, well, this person says it works this way for them. That's also what I'm looking for. So it's also been great to get, again, a great source of feedback is, what is the store experience physically that makes it so unique, and what are ways that I can translate that into e-commerce so that I can capture more sales other than, as opposed to my competitors, they're strictly thinking with that e-commerce lens and aren't thinking as much with the brick and mortar lens.
Yeah, because coming from the brick and mortar going to the e-commerce, you're totally right. The touch points, you maybe start to lose them. And if you get into Facebook ads and Instagram ads, which are great, those are great. They yield, but there's so much noise, and there will be continued so much noise from now through October. Definitely after the election, it's going to be wild, etc. Like we can't, you can't remove small business from the geopolitics that surround us. And so talking about the messaging of your products, could you share with us a little bit about your own story and how you got into this space? Because I think it's one that will resonate with a lot of people, because so many entrepreneurs, they start off doing X, Y, and Z, and in one moment to the next, they're on to A, B, and C because of something that kind of happened. So what was that, apple falling on your head moment? What was the moment that kind of like, wow, I'm going to shift. This is where I want to go?
Yeah. So all of my career, or, obviously pre-cannabis career, has all been in technology. I worked at FedEx for years in their IT department. And then when we moved back up to New England from Tennessee, I started working for a really cool wearable device startup. And it was great. I had this really cool slick job and I was super excited until the company started not doing so well. And for some reason, I was just in this weird mind space that I started taking it way, way, way too personally. I mean, much more personally than I even take things like with my own company. And I was under so much stress that things weren't going well that I absolutely wasn't sleeping. I had horrible, horrible insomnia where I was up like all night. I was basically taking like a series of 30-minute naps at night, getting to the point where I was pretty much useless during the day. I was no help to, I was no use at work. I was no use at home. I was just basically like a shell of a human. It had been that long. And I tried everything to try to sleep, the Tylenol PMs, alcohol, like everything. I knew that my next step, if I was going to take it, which I was really hesitant, was go to the doctor and they were going to give me Ambien. But people do crazy stuff on Ambien. And I don't have a whole lot of confidence that isn't going to give me wasn't going to give me some kind of like long-term issues. And just that wasn't an area I was comfortable to go in. So without any good solutions that I could come up with on my own, I was really, really struggling. And my husband was like, at the time, and my husband cracks up so much about this, I was very anti-marijuana because it's illegal. And if the government says it's illegal, it must be really bad for you. So I was like, no. And he's like, oh my God, just smoke some weed. I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. No. Mr. T told me to say no to drugs. So finally I was like, fine. Like I am so out of ideas. I took like this little tiny puff out the bathroom window. It was so shameful. Got into bed, like conked out. Woke up the next morning at my alarm. My husband's like cheering for me. He's like, yay, you slept all night. And I was like, oh my God, it's that bad that I'm actually getting applause for sleeping. Got up, felt great that day. Finally was like, oh my God, like I'm starting to connect dots in my brain. Like things are actually working. This has to be a coincidence. The next night, same thing. The next night, the same thing. And I was like, why is nobody talking about this? Why, if I had gone into my doctor, which I didn't want to do because I felt like I was complaining, And like, especially women, just like, we don't like to complain, and it's, worry about ourselves. We want to worry about everybody else and put their needs first. So I was like, why is this working so well? And nobody's talking about it. Certainly my doctor wasn't going to be like, just smoke some weed, it'll be totally fine, and it's all natural. So I started doing my own research, only of course to find out what now we know is that the reasons why cannabis is legal have nothing to do with the plant and have more to do with just people being assholes, basically. And the fact that it's been used for centuries safely in ritual and for medicine. It was even in the US pharmacopoeia in the early 1900s. And it's just been demonized because for many, many reasons. So I always say, like, that research that I did was kind of like the beginning of my radicalization, where I always looked at the people who would go to the, free the flower rallies and stuff like that as those people. And I was like, oh God, now I'm one of those people. And I totally get where they're coming from. Like, I totally get it. Like, I get why all those people that, God, we made fun of and they, put down in history class and stuff like that. I'm like, oh my God, now I totally get why they were like that. And now I'm one of those people because we're not talking about it. And people don't have access to this plant, and people have been told so many wrong things about it. So not only was I really just kind of focused on being like, what else can I get out of this plant? I mean, sleep is one thing, I hurt my back, all that kind of thing. Like, what can I get out of it? But also, how can I help other people, especially other women, connect the dots and understand that, like, yes, you want natural solutions. You don't want to be filling your body with chemicals. Everyone has, I think, a very healthy, like, view that the FDA might not be really doing everything that they say they're doing. So people are looking for natural solutions, and how can I make this more accessible so people can have that life-changing moment like I had? And that was really the moment for me, as I was kind of, experimenting in my own kitchen and making things to help solve my problems, which it turns out, like, lots of people have trouble sleeping, and lots of people have shoulder pain, and lots of people, get stressed out during the day and need a little boost of energy and focus, and that's really where the seed was planted that is now Kind Lab.
So you smoke, you pass out, you get an applause, you wake up, everything starts to change. And then you just start to wonder, okay, how come I didn't know about all this, etc. And how does your story resonate with other people locally in Beverly when you share that, when you talk about that? Because I know, as you know, so many people have problems sleeping. I've had problems sleeping over the last couple of years. It's gotten better recently, but especially now that we're in the pandemic, there is a lot of substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or otherwise.
I know.
And a lot of people aren't sleeping. And I think with the pain, that is the way that I know many professional athletes cope with pain. In college, that is the way I played college soccer. That's how, many people who played college sports cope with pain, because they don't want to go down. And we know what happens when you take oxycodone. Then eventually that doesn't work. And then you get into heroin. Then eventually that doesn't work. And then there's just, it's literally the race to the bottom. And so I think it's very interesting. And I think we'll only continue to see athletes using CBD, using these types of things, and being able to have a more honest conversation, because that kind of creates a conversation, right? Okay, you have shoulder pain. Cool. Maybe you should try this product. It will, try this cream, I'm sure you have CBD chews, maybe for body aches or whatever it is. How are those conversations kind of received? I'm interested on, the person who kind of walks into the CBD shop, has an ache, has a pain, can't sleep. There's a reason why they decided to, like, duck their head in. And how are those conversations? Because I think that there is a lot of stigma. There's cultural stigma. There's a lot of shame around these things, because for so long you grew up, like you said, Mr. T said, don't do drugs, say no. And for so long, cannabis was seen as right up there next to heroin and cocaine.
Right.
And even, there were mandatory minimums around it that also put it on similar levels as far as, like, if you got caught with it. Now, obviously, we're in a completely different world, but much of that stigma is still there. And there are many people who still feel, hey, if I smoke, then I'm a hippie. If I smoke, I'm this. We self put ourselves in boxes. Mm-hmm. So how are those conversations? And then, more importantly, how is that messaging going to continue with you now going online?
So it's interesting because even in the past, like, 2 years, the difference between when people come in, it used to be people come in, they'd be like, do you have to see my ID? Like, I've never been in this kind of store before. It was like almost like they couldn't say the words. Now, fortunately, I mean, being in Massachusetts and in New England with marijuana, like we had the medical program for a long time, which has been very successful, and now adult use, people at least are getting more used to the fact that it's around, and they come in and they just want the information. And there is definitely, to a certain extent, you see as people skew a little bit older, the conversation, they do want to know a little bit more and they need a little bit more reassurance. And I think it helps that I am not probably the typical person that you would see like in a dispensary or something like that. I'm probably more of a peer to a lot of those people. So I think it's helpful for them to see like, oh, here's a functioning adult my age. Like, clearly it can't be that bad. And then for the people who are younger, you know, in their 20s and into their 30s, they come in and then I'm like the mom that will tell them like the truth about cannabis. So, you know, having those one-on-one conversations and being like the live human in front of them, I think is really helpful. I would say the conversation has gotten definitely easier. The stigma, most people have kind of got their head wrapped around it much better, but there definitely is still a lot of misinformation out there, and people come in and they think they know what they're talking about, but they really don't, which is ironic because you think when, you know, it came out that St. John's wort helped with depression, people were like pounding it, you know what I mean? And they didn't even ask questions. I remember going into GNC and just buying a bottle of it, but you would never see that with hemp, which is so unfortunate because it can do so much more than St. John's wort. So just that conversation like has to happen. Most people who come in and who are like, I'm interested in CBD, like need some level of backstory before they just jump into a product. They need to understand that they won't get high. They need to understand the difference between, you know, marijuana and hemp and the legalities of it and that kind of thing. So it's interesting. I think I've definitely seen the conversations get easier, but the stigma is by no means gone. And having the storefront is really helpful. And again, that almost like the image that the store portrays being very clean and laid out very well and being like visually very attractive and kind of having like, you know, not that Apple store look, but like a look that is very well branded is something that I'm trying to translate to the website. So it does look clean. It's easy to navigate. So people who are already coming in about a confusing and potentially embarrassing topic have a little bit more confidence and can easily find and get the information they need so they can make that purchase.
Selling online is just so different from the in-store experience. And especially when it's a product that is so personal. If I buy a t-shirt online, for example, and I don't like it, I can just return it. If I open up if I open up some of your gummies, it's going to be a lot more difficult to return. What are your policies going forward? Because I had a t-shirt company for a while. And one of the things I really struggled with was the fact that I essentially had to offer free shipping because we live in an Amazon world. And so if you don't have free shipping, never mind free returns, if you don't even have free shipping or you work that into the price somehow, it really turns the average consumer off because they're so used to that. You know, 1 in 3 people has an Amazon Prime account. Never mind, it's probably more households, you know, most households have an Amazon Prime account. So if they're buying a product online, they know they can get it, open it up. If they don't like it, they can send it back. They're going to get all their money back. And it's a hassle-free kind of situation. And I assume that that's kind of how it would be if I opened up some gummies. I don't like them. I come to the store, hey, Angela, I really didn't like these. Maybe you would, you know, transition me to a different product to see if I would go with that, but hopefully in a way that it would be beneficial for me as a customer and also beneficial for you as a store owner, because at the end of the day, you can't be, you know, returns are really, really bad. Mm-hmm. And so how does that, I know, I'm not sure if this is too much of a weird question or tough question, but what are your thoughts about those types of policies moving forward to make the online experience as seamless and as customer driven and customer first as I'm sure the in-store experience? Because every time I've been in, it's been super great. My parents have gone in. My dad bought the ABCs of CBD. It's still at the house. He's looked through that a little bit before we started to have my mom try some of that. You know, they were hemp pills for sleep, and those were great. And so what are you thinking, you know, as you get online, what are the hurdles you see? Because for me, it's like the hurdles are probably going to be around returns, et cetera, because that's just crazy lost revenue. And more than anything, it's time. So what are you thinking about with those type of experiences?
So, I mean, fortunately, the store is like a good testing point in terms of returns. All sales are final, and I make that very clear, like everywhere. Now, you always have people come in who will be upset. And, you always have to make exceptions, or maybe I've had people come in and they're like, well, I got this product because it was less expensive, but it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, that's because you have chronic arthritis, and this product is really not for that level of pain. And so there are two parts of it. First of all, it's making sure you're getting the person the product that is right for them. And that's a big part of what I really want to focus on the store is don't just like randomly buy something and hope that that was the right thing. Like if you buy the right product and use it correctly, it should make a difference. So helping people understand what to buy and how to use the product is super, super important, because that's going to greatly reduce your return rate. You're always going to have those exceptions, the people that just aren't happy, and I deal with those on a one-off basis. But if I can connect the dots and get the person the right product, usually like my return rate in the store, knock on wood, is pretty low. And so it's trying to translate that to online. The other thing that I found is helpful is to provide a range of products. So I have a topical that's $40 and I have one that's $80. I have chews that are $45. I have a tincture that's $120. So it's also giving people options so they can opt in where they're most comfortable. And then what I always tell people is if you're using the right product in the right amount, it should make a difference. So if your $40 roll, balm helped you a little bit, but you wanted to help more better, then up it to the next level of product. So it's also making sure you've got a wide enough range of, price points with effective products behind them that help people with different levels of comfort get in at the right level. And then ideally getting in at the product that's going to work the best for them. So that's part of it to help reduce the return rate and to increase customer satisfaction. Because obviously, if someone loves your product, they're going to lend it out to their friends. I have so many people being like, I have a friend who gave me one of your gummies, or I have a friend who, had me use some of your Relief Advanced cream and, before we golfed or whatever. And that's a big way where I get customers. And so keeping that positive momentum is really important. The shipping, I think, is something that crushes all small businesses. When COVID hit, I did offer free shipping because people were so used to coming into the store. And I was doing a lot of local delivery because I live here. So for me, just, I had nothing but what else were we doing? So I was just driving things around and dropping off goodie bags, especially because people were so stressed out. And so they were going through their products a lot faster than usual. I still do offer free shipping now on the site, but I probably will start to put in, do the math and figure out at what point do I offer free shipping below this dollar amount and have the amount be fixed. And so if I lose, if I charge someone, $2.50 for shipping and the label is $5, but at least now they have the product and they're going to start buying it. While I'm building a brand, I hate to lose that revenue or have the, cost of goods sold kind of chew into my revenue. But for me, it's worth it to get Kind Lab products into customers' hands and to give them that good experience. So I'm still at the point where I'm willing to eat a little bit on shipping to make sure that the customer ends up going through the checkout.
Is there a customer that now comes in all the time or now buys a good amount, a certain demographic that you just never thought would have been down with CBD?
It's interesting. I will tell you, it's almost the opposite of what I thought. I have a lot of college age students come in and they're very curious, but they're very they're so hesitant. And they really do. I know I was super surprised when they come in, they're like, I'm really stressed out and I don't know what to do. And I don't know if maybe, and it's almost always stress. And I don't know if maybe their stress has gotten them to the point where, you get super overwhelmed and you can't make any decisions. So you want someone to just tell you what to do. Or, there's still a lot of say no to drugs happening in school and they're coming out still with a lot of that same perception. So the people who surprise me are a lot of the people who are, in their early 20s who are still really, affected by the stigma. People who are, I would say, 65 plus are at the point where they're like, I don't even care. If it works for me, I will bathe in it. I will gargle it. I will do whatever you want. It doesn't even matter. And then they have those people where you think they'd be all curmudgeons and stuff like that. And they're like, screw it. If it can make me bend over and tie my shoes, I will literally put you in my will. So those are, you always kind of have those surprises. And that's, again, another thing, which I hate to say because I'm closing the store in 2 days, but that's been super fun about the store is just kind of seeing who walks in and, kind of getting that overview of how the overall perception and at what age and why does that change about cannabis.
Right. Because if you were to ask me and say, which demographic do you think would be in with like absolutely no question and would be buying, I'd say maybe the younger demographic as opposed to maybe like you're saying the plus 65. However, on the other side, there's the economics. Maybe the younger college student doesn't have the money for the price point of the product, whereas the person who's 65 or older, they're getting a pension, they have some social security, they have something coming in, and they've been using other products, which they're just definitely not happy with if they're normal FDA approved drugs for pain or whatever, and they're looking for something that's going to maybe not make them so hazy and be a more of an organic option.
Right.
I think the other thing is the interesting landscape of college students in Beverly, because you have Endicott kids who for me are like more of a classic college experience. They're fairly well off economically. They're not a dry campus, it's a wet campus. Then you have Gordon College, which is a lot more of a religious influence. So maybe those kids are being, they have a different stigma about them. And then in between, you have all of the art school kids who, you would think were a little bit more free thinkers. If you're an artist, if you're a designer, et cetera, maybe more secular than, religious in some sense. So I think every time I'm in Beverly and I'm thinking about that as like a small business owner, that's just a very interesting dichotomy amongst those three groups. So that's where the question came from. Cause I was like, who's going in the shop? If an elderly person walks in, if a Gordon College kid, it's like a joke, right? If an elderly kid, Gordon College, right? Endicott, and a Montserrat, who's going to buy first and what are they buying?
Yeah.
So that's
when they're all in here at the same time, it's super fun.
Exactly. And everyone is, looking for a little support. And so thinking about demographics and that I know you do, are you still doing CrossFit? Is that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Are you able to like get that in the gyms? Do those worlds mesh? Because some worlds you're like, oh, I wouldn't think about that, but that makes sense. Do those worlds mesh? Because that's a high intensive activity and there's always injuries. When you're doing an Olympic lift and putting a bar over your head, your shoulders, your gates, right? Your shoulders, your hips, your knees, and your ankles are under some stress.
Yeah. And CrossFit people are like, they're notorious for overtraining too. And so just the risk of injury is pretty high. And CrossFit my friends at CrossFit, I go to CrossFit Iron Spider in Salem. They have been a phenomenal testing ground for all my topicals. And actually I do have a certain, like if someone comes in and I can see that they're in running shoes or they have a CrossFit shirt, like I can almost immediately be like, here, just take this home. It will improve your life. Things that are just going to help with like muscle soreness and all that kind of thing. But recovery is like athletic recovery is CBD for it is like unbelievable. The better your sleep is, the better your body's able to recover. Reducing inflammation, reducing nerve and muscle pain and all that kind of like helping to resolve tendon issues, which is like another big issue when you're lifting heavier, even, rock climbing and everything. So there's definitely a very clear overlap with CBD in the sports world. And a lot of my customers are CrossFit athletes as well as other athletes, like anyone who's kind of into sports where you're like overdoing it. So, triathletes, people who do those like tough mudders and all those Spartan races and stuff like that. And I always tell them, I'm like, there is literally no downside to trying it. Worst case scenario, it does nothing. Best case scenario, you're able to push yourself that much harder, or you wake up from a hard workout the next morning and you don't feel like you're rising from the crypt. You know what I mean? Like you just feel that much better.
What are the other products that people maybe were using before and now aren't using? Are we talking about like icy hots, those type of products as far as balms?
Right. So like a lot of people will be like, I use BioFreeze and that works. I'm like, okay, well, BioFreeze was fantastic like 10 years ago, but they've now it's really got a lot of like artificial ingredients in it. And a lot of those, the icy hots, all those balms and stuff like that are really actually just tricking your brain. They have like, the menthol or something in that gives your body that cooling feeling. And basically your brain can only focus on so many points at the same time. So that cooling feeling distracts your brain to like forget about the pain and focus on the cooling. So you think that it's making you feel better, but first of all, it's actually just tricking your brain. So it's temporary. And second of all, it's doing nothing to resolve the underlying problem. time is going to resolve the underlying problem. So people I used BioFreeze and it got better. I'm like, well, it was probably going to get better anyway, because the BioFreeze is not going to help you heal. It is not going to, reduce the swelling and help with any like long-term issues that are underlying there that are causing those problems. And so that's the perk too with the hemp products is like, these are not just going to help you like reduce your body stress and tension and those aches short term, but like long term to help resolve them permanently and also to help prevent them from coming back. So that's why I just think CBD, hemp, and cannabis too, marijuana as well in the sports world, like it's just such a no-brainer.
Every time I play, I have a partially torn meniscus in my left knee, and every time I play soccer pickup, I religiously I know that it's not helping me long term. It literally just gets me through. And I try to train so even when I play pickup, I'm not going to hurt myself. I always front and the back of the knee, a little rub. And so I always smell like icy hot. But do you have something that would be better for that? That would help me through the exercise?
So I always tell people like you can use our Serenity Solve. That's the one where that is like the major hit with all the athletes, like weekend warriors and like people who are professional athletes come into the store. And that's the one, it's a blend of full spectrum hemp extract and magnesium. And the full spectrum hemp extract is obviously going to help with the swelling and also does help, like it is an analgesic, or I think that's how you say it. It's pain relieving and that kind of thing. And then the magnesium is really also helping. That's like more of the muscle, tendon, nerve pain to help relax things. It also helps reduce swelling and is great for pain relief. So like that combination, because I had before like almost like an icy hot, strictly CBD balm. And I had people coming in with things like restless leg, muscle cramping, back pain. And they're like, the balm works, but not that great. And so I started doing more research, and it's that muscle, tendon, nerve, like that side of things is much more complex. And that combination of the magnesium and the CBD has just been game changing for people who like are more in that muscle, tendon, nerve space. And so that's the one I always tell people, because the biggest trick is like once the pain's gone, they're like, it's magic, it's all gone. And it's like, well, no, now you've kind of weakened that spot in your body. So you always just have to be smart about it, especially like depending on your age, or if it is like a chronic problem where it's something that flares up, even if it's every just couple of years, then there's like underlying damage there. So I tell people like, put it on before your activity, put it on after, like just be proactive. Because usually when they come into the store, there's already a problem. So now we're dealing with like reactive. But if you can be proactive, then you keep yourself in the game just that much longer, because you're keeping yourself from doing further damage and also just from unnecessarily experiencing pain when you can try to prevent that.
The idea of being proactive rather than reactive is a really difficult thing for our society to understand around healthcare and self-care, because normally we only react when we're at a point like, oh, I ripped my ACL walking down the street. Oh, well, why did you do that? Oh, because you've been putting on 10 to 15 pounds every year because you're eating the types of food you've been eating for the past 10 years. I saw that on the website, it's like the Kind Lab movement. What is the overall philosophy around Kind Lab, and where do you potentially see now that it's going to just be online that it could grow into something different? Because part of me is like, yeah, she should be sitting at, a CrossFit tournament, like, here, try this, here, try this, here, try this, here, with little samples, because many athletes, here's the other thing, and you're an athlete as well. Many athletes, once we find something, it's so hard for us, just like humans. If you go to the same restaurant, you always order the same thing because you don't want to get outside. Like, that's good. That's good. But athletes, I feel like as an athlete myself, I will only wear Nike cleats for soccer, for example. I know Adidas has a very nice cleat. I used to wear Puma in high school, also a superior fit. That's cool. I will only wear Nike cleats. So is there kind of a change of culture that needs to happen for athletes or just for people in general? How do you see that working? And are people now maybe a little bit more open, obviously, if other things aren't working?
Right. I think, a huge part of the mission with Kind Lab is prioritizing your wellness, putting your wellness first. And that was really from me, like letting myself get to the point where I was circling the drain. Like if you are a caregiver, you are trying to do your best at work and you're trying to do your best at home. I have a husband, I have children. And I was so focused on making sure everybody else was taken care of that I wasn't taking care of myself at all. And so that's a big part of it, is like, you have to take care of yourself, and you have to understand that taking care of yourself is not selfish, because a lot of people are like, YOLO, brunch, whatever. And it's like, no, self-care is actually a lot different than that. It is like cutting people out of your life that are toxic. It is taking the time like to get your mental health organized. It's, making sure your body, like you're like paying attention to what you put in your body. So that's been a big part of our mission. The other part of it that has come up so much more since COVID is that, your body is not magical and it is not going to last forever. And you have to take care of it. The days where you woke up every morning and felt great ended in your 20s, and those are never coming back. So you can't just keep taking your wellness for granted. It is something you have to actively work on. And to your point, don't wait until you're sick. Then it's too late. So a big part of what I've been trying to help educate people, not only prioritize your wellness, and that is like a radical form of self-care, is also like raise your baseline. You should always be working to raise your baseline, because then when you get sick, your baseline is that much higher. So your dip is going to be like that. It's going to be that much improved. Like we're trying to raise the bar for everyone. So your wellness is just at a higher level. So you're so much better suited to go out in a world that is pretty much ready to knock you down, like from just a physical standpoint, like just virus and the whole thing. So that's really been something we've tried to fold into our messaging, is that you get to a point where you cannot take your wellness for granted, and you need to be like an active participant in making sure that your body is going to get you where you want to be in life. And you're not watching it's kind of like that frog in the boiling water where it doesn't realize it until it's too late, because the water just gets warm and warm and it keeps adapting until it just can't and it dies. Like, let's not do that. Let's not be the frog in the boiling water. Let's be proactive here and make sure that you're always prioritizing your wellness and trying to keep your baseline as high as possible. And the end result is you have a much, much improved quality of life.
Is there a product or a brand that KindLab really resonates with and could do well with in pursuing increasing people's baseline health?
Right. I mean, I think, so in my house, you're right, because I'm always like telling people to take CBD. My husband has bad knees, the whole thing. Usually what I end up, because they're like, oh, okay, I'll do it. Well, I keep forgetting. I tell them if you have a problem and you're doing nothing about it, you're not allowed to complain. Don't complain. If you're not going to do anything about it, you just can't complain. So, you can do nothing about it, but then I don't want to hear it. So that usually works pretty well in my house.
In the house. If you told customers that would be interesting.
Yeah, that probably would be bad. But when people come in, I mean, I'm at the point where when people come in, I can see them shifting. Like I can see them and I'm like, I can see you shifting. Does your back hurt? And I'm like, I bet when you wake up in the morning, you're pushing yourself up straight and you're having trouble getting up, and you can't lean. If you drop your phone on the floor as you're getting out of bed, you can't bend over and get it. And they're like, oh my God, yes. Oh my God, yes. And so I try to encourage them to see a world where those restrictions are gone. And if they don't have those restrictions that they've gotten used to, that their quality of life will improve. Wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to think about, I've got to take it easy today because tomorrow I'm walking my granddaughter to the library or something like that, and I need to make sure that I'm going to be able to walk. Or, wow, I need to go lean back and grab something in the back of my car. I'm bracing myself because I know it's going to send a zing through my shoulder or something like that. So it's all those things that when people come in, I try to help them envision a world where those barriers are gone and their quality of life has improved. And all of a sudden, all these little things that maybe they didn't realize that they were thinking about, like shifting their weight so their back wouldn't start hurting, or, like being really careful when they have to tie their shoes because their knee bothers them, like trying to envision a world where that's not happening and it's not slowing them down. It's kind of like the whole thing with the, what was it, the iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket. It's like not trying to pitch them on the product, but more so pitch them on like, what is the life that you want to live? What is the life that you did live? And where do you want to get back to is really what it is. And how can you make proactive steps to getting there? So that's really like the picture I try to paint for people. And when they come in, for stress, I always ask them, how's your sleep? Because sleep is like the number one key to making your days better. So I'm like, if you come in and you're stressed and you have trouble sleeping, let's solve for sleep. So it's just kind of walking people through, like, as much smart as people are, you can be really dumb about yourself. I'm the perfect example of that. Drinking wine, taking Tylenol PM, like just like not even knowing what to do, just basically suffering through insomnia because I didn't know what to do. So the people who walk in the door are already a step ahead because they're bothering to ask for help, where I wasn't even at that point. So it's really just trying to get people to visualize, like, what does a better quality of life mean for you? And can you see yourself without having some of these restrictions that you have now? And if you can, and you want to make that vision come true, then you need to be consistent about using the products. And that's usually the easiest way to pitch it.
There's this idea though, that once you're old, it's over. That's it. Oh, I'll never do that again. And it's kind of like, I think you can, you may be able to feel like you're 20 again. It just isn't going to happen without an investment in what you're eating and then what you're doing every day in your waking hours, because walking 30 minutes could help. Riding your bike could help, rock climbing, or doing something. Movement is medicine in so many ways. And so I've just been confronting that more as I get into my mid 30s, and I have friends now who are, closer friends who are a little bit older than I am, and they're getting into their 40s. I just hear a lot of these like, oh, I'm almost 40, so I'll never be able to run again. And then I'm like, do you look on Instagram? There's always an 80-year-old woman who just did a marathon. Totally. I read an article about a 51-year-old guy who's playing in the J League, the Japanese soccer league. And this is his 5th decade. He's started in the 80s as a teenager, played in the 90s, played in the 2000s, 2010s, and he just started a game the other day. First player to ever play over 5 decades. He's 51 years old.
Wow, that's incredible.
For every excuse and times I hear that, oh, my body will never do that again. It's like, yeah, I think it can do it again. But where you used to be able to, like you said, just get up and be 20 and kind of do what you want and maybe drink and go out the next day. It's like, no, you now need to train and really invest. And I think you can do that. And I personally feel that plant-based products, especially like the ones that you guys are creating, is not only the present, but it's the future. And so I'm hoping to see more and more athletes move towards CBD. And do you know of any big athletes that have endorsed CBD or have, their CBD or, getting their sponsorship from CBD?
I know when I went to CanMed in Boston a couple of years ago, which is like a really big science medical conference about cannabis, there was a group of NFL players who have been very, very active proponents of making marijuana, taking it off of the scheduled list for NFL players, because they get pumped so full of painkillers and all kinds of stuff, because they're really their value to the teams is only if they are on the field. And so the entire mindset of that club is to just keep them on the field. And if that doesn't work long-term for the athletes, it's kind of too bad, so sad. This is where you're at right now. And we're trying to maximize basically your worth. And so they're really lobbying to use it for concussions, to use it for pain management. So people don't become opioid addicts just because they're professional athletes. And so there are a lot of athletes really embracing CBD. In the CrossFit world, it has gotten big with a couple of other brands, which I kind of kick myself for not jumping on. But my brand is it's kind of like when you pick a lane, you can be everything to everyone. If you try to be everything to everyone, then you end up being no one to anyone, So when I picked a lane, just there wasn't a really obvious connection to athletes, but I end up by default, because my products are very effective for athletes, getting a lot of people in my store looking for that kind of relief. But there's definitely I think a lot of discussion amongst professional athletes of why certainly hemp, but also marijuana should be allowed to be used. And there are some pretty big, high profile athletes that are out there endorsing it.
That's good to hear, because I think that should have happened a while ago. And if the NFL were a lot more progressive, they would be on the forefront of that, saying that, yeah, we don't want our athletes who come in the league. And one of the best quotes I heard recently was through the uninterrupted platform that LeBron James created. He created this platform. They have a podcast. It's a whole movement. It's called Uninterrupted. He created it. He spearheads it, but a lot of other athletes are in it, men, women. And it's basically the idea that the media always paints us and tells us who we are, but we now can create a podcast. We now can create a YouTube. We now can create our content, so you know exactly what we think about these things. And it was in that series where I was listening to some NFL players talk with LeBron, and they were saying, our best ability is our availability. And so the league will do anything to get us on that field. And more recently, this past week, I think it was a Dolphins player. He was getting injected with some type of a steroid, and they punctured his lung.
Oh, God.
Because they were trying to get a rib, and they missed the rib and they punctured his lung, whatever. So the other thing is the average, NFL player is only in the league for 3.5 years. And that is a blip of time. So what you're saying is you could have an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid by the time he's 24. Maybe he didn't stay in college. Maybe he doesn't have an education.
Right.
He doesn't have many skills. He may also have gotten CTE, which will show up later in his 30s or 40s. And he may have also gotten addicted to painkillers. So I would love to see that league, especially as being one of probably the biggest leagues in the United States, be a better proponent for how athletes take care of themselves. And I think CBD is probably at the forefront as something that's going to be a little bit more accepted maybe before cannabis, due to a lot of the stigma around the country, unfortunately, that still exists around cannabis maybe. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I've just seen a lot more athletes go into the plant-based lifestyle with, what's the movie? It just came out in September of last year. You know what I'm talking about? Oh, I'm blanking on it. Super something. But anyways, it basically chronicles the lives of many athletes who are vegan, plant-based.
Oh, I gotta look that up.
And how they aren't weaker for it. In fact, they're stronger and their recovery is crazy. And Scott Jurek is one of the athletes, and he's just, like a crazy triathloner. He'll just go run a couple 100 miles over like a week and it's like nothing.
Right.
So I just think that this fits into that conversation really nicely.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even Tom Brady with the whole TB12, isn't that what it is? Like his whole plant-based, I think. I mean, hearing the football players speak, because you're like, oh, they're just like a bunch of big dopes. And it's like, no, these are live humans and they need to have a life. They have a life before and they need to have a life after. And they're not like this isn't just an expendable person that you can like just feed, do anything you want so they get on the field. And so I think athletes are also starting to get more proactive to take care of themselves and to make sure that like they can have a life. So if they have to retire at 25, like their life isn't over at 25, like they can have, a fulfilling life after that. So it is nice seeing like athletes take charge in the professional world. And I think that will definitely trickle down to, like I said, like, your people who are just like natural, like you and I, who just go to the gym consistently, people who compete in marathons and the whole thing, like kind of trickle down, even down to the weekend warriors, people just being more proactive.
The documentary, I looked it up because I wanted to make sure I say it out loud in the pod so people can go. It's called The Game Changers. It came out. It should still be on Netflix, unless I'm wrong. But it's a fascinating look and it tells you a lot of things. For me, it was kind of like an echo chamber, which maybe isn't the most healthy place because I've been looking at plant-based lifestyle for a while and really tried to cut out certain products because I know that long-term they're not good. And even in the short term, they're not helping me recover. But that was always what I told myself. And when you go to school and you're in college and you're playing sports, that idea was foreign. And for so long, I was like, oh, I would never do that. No way. I'm not that guy. I would eat crazy amounts of red meat and chicken. And now I'm in a completely different headspace and I feel better. I feel just generally lighter. And I think, I just feel more free. Movement is easier and it's less restricted. So The Game Changers, check it out. But I think the CBD and this plant-based products really fit well within that. So
yeah. And our products are vegan, even like we don't even use beeswax. So everything, we use a plant-based wax. So I mean, that is definitely part of our mission too, is to try to get the most out of nature, but really focusing on plants.
Where can people find you now that you're no longer going to have your store, but that's okay because you're going to have your great website, which I've been on. I really like it. And I follow your Instagram, which has a lot of good self-care tweets from all types of people. And especially since COVID, it's like, oh, that was a really good self-care tweet from KindLab.
So you can find us. Our website is kindlabco.com. And then on Instagram, we're kindlab_co. On Facebook, we're just kindlab. And on Twitter, we're kindlab_co. And we're also on Pinterest, which is our new social media platform, just as kindlab as well. So we're everywhere you want to be.
Exactly. Everywhere you want to be.
So cheesy. You can edit that part out, I promise.
Maybe I'll keep this too. Please edit that. Please edit. Take that out in post. I told you I didn't want that. Well, thank you, Angela, for hopping on. And I look forward to see how things go online. I know it's going to go well.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. It was great talking to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode, and be sure to check out Kind Labs products at kindlabsco.com. If you'd like to be a guest or have an idea for a future episode, be sure to find us and reach out on Instagram or Facebook at Wi-Fi Water Podcast. Also, if you're listening to this on your smartphone, go ahead, subscribe, and leave a review. This just makes it easier for everyone else to find the pod. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.